like by mass, in case everything else is used as separate organs, and whole of the skin is one organ. Okay, so skin is covering almost all of our surface. There are holes here and there because we have to, like, breathe and see and eat and poop and things like that. So there are holes which are not covered by skin. We are going to talk about those holes more when we get to the immune system, because those are the parts where the defenses have to, go up, because there's a direct contact with the outside world. Everywhere else, the contact with the outside world is the skin, and skin is thick, and skin is impermeable. It's really, really hard for pathogens or anything like that to go through the skin. It's going to protect you from injury to some extent, right? Unless, you're mauled by a lion or something. But you can run around, you can do stuff, you can hit yourself and it's fine, because your skin is protected. Also, keeping you all together so your guts don't spill out, right? So skin has a lot of different functions, but mostly defending you from the outside world, keeping you together, keeping you separate from the outside world, so various mechanical or biological insults from the outside do not affect you. In order to do that, it has to be thick. Now, when we think about skin, we like to focus on the epidermis, but actually it's dermis that is the thick part. All of this is epidermis here, dermis is down here. So let's go with the epidermis first. Epidermis is an epithelium, which means it's covering the surface, and it has a basement membrane, which is going to be about here. And it is a stratified squamous epithelium, which means it has multiple layers of flat cells. And it's keratinized, which means a lot of those cells are full of keratin. But if you look carefully, the first layer, the stratum basale, the first layer, those cells are not flat, right? They're pretty round still. But most of the cells are flat. As they go away from the basement membrane, they get flatter and flatter. So those on the top, you see how flat they are? They're definitely squamous. So basement, stratum basale, those are the first layer of cells, and those are the stem cells of the skin. They keep dividing. Each one of those stem cells divides into another stem cell and a skin cell. Skin cells are called keratinocytes. Because they are going to acquire keratin. So keratinocytes are going to, as they divide, move away from the basement membrane. So the basement membrane is stratum basale, so those are the stem cells that are dividing. And so that layer of stem cells, as they're dividing, stays attached to the basement membrane, and all the daughter cells that are regular skin cells are going to migrate. They're going to move, being pushed away and away and away and away. Epidermis has no vasculature. What does that mean? There are no capillaries, no arteries and veins going in there. So all the nutrients for these cells is coming from the dermis, from the underneath, right? And it's going to go by diffusion. Well, by diffusion, oxygen, glucose, that stuff, it's not going to go far. A couple layers of cells, and then suddenly those cells are suffocating and starving, and they start dying, right? So the first few layers are alive. Like the first couple layers are definitely nice and healthy, and then the next few layers are still alive but suffering, and then they die, and the rest of the layers are dead cells. As they're moving away from the basement membrane, as they're dividing, these cells are dividing and pushing everything away, they start changing in various ways. So because they're changing in various ways, they look different under the microscope. So the early microscopists, the early histologists who have sliced skins and looked at the microscope, gave names to these layers. So the first is stratobasala because it's basal, right? It's on the base. And the next one is spinosum because it looked like the cells had spines. Now we know that it is a byproduct of how the slides were preserved. There's no spines actually in those cells. But when you're preserving with particular chemicals, and slicing in a particular way, putting a particular dye on there, it looks like they have spines. So it's stuck. The stratum spinosum being the next one. And that's the layer where they're starting to die pretty seriously, and because of lack of oxygen and lack of nutrients, and they're starting to really fill in with keratin. They're also starting to glue each other to each other using various desmosomes and various other structures in order to make themselves really stuck to each other really closely, and some other processes which make them impenetrable to water. So the water cannot pass through them. And then, as they get pushed away and away and away, and they're fully dead, you get a stratum granulosum. Those granules are granules of keratin, and those cells are by now dead and much more flat, much more squamous, and under a microscope they look like they have granules, so they're stratum granulosum. You've got to learn that name in that order. Stratum lucidum. Lucidum means what? Transparent or bright, right? They, you don't see any nucleus in any kind of structure inside of it. They look pretty bright. You find this layer only in the thick skin. Where do you find thick skin? In the soles of your feet and the palms of your hands, right? Everywhere else is thin skin. So on the thick skin is the only place where you can find this thin stratum lucidum, which under the microscope looks very clear and transparent. You need to know that also for the lab practical next week on the model of the skin. There is one layer that goes only in the thick skin and not in the thin skin. That is the stratum lucidum. And then on the very surface is the stratum corneum. That's the completely dead cells that are sloughing off as dander. Right? So in different parts, in that thick skin, this is going to be dozens of layers. It could be 100 layers of those, really kind of protecting you from you're walking or handling stuff, protecting your body from the outside by having a whole bunch of layers of these dead cells that are glued together and impenetrable to water. Okay. So this is a little bit thicker now. There is a thin skin on the top, so that's the epidermis over there. But underneath, you see the dermis, and dermis has two layers: the papillary layer and the reticular layer. Now, the papillary layer is intertwined, sort of. The basement membrane of the epidermis is going sort of like this over the papilla, and it's forming little ridges, and those little mountains are usually organized in lines. So there's mountain top and the next mountain top and the next one, next one, next one, next one. So it feels like a ridge, feels like one line, and those are the fingerprints. So the papillary layer of the dermis and essentially the papillary layer of the basement membrane of the stratum basale together form your fingerprints. These ridges allow you to better grasp things, right? And we talked about it, it's not genetically determined, it's just embryological, it's going to kind of random push those things, so that's why everybody has a different fingerprint. Okay. So the reticular layer made of reticular connective tissue. So dermis is, dermis is the connective tissue underneath the epidermis. And it's made of mostly reticular connective tissue. And it has nerves and it has arteries, it has veins, which means it's fully, supplied with oxygen and nutrients and everything it needs. Okay, let's see what else can we find here. On this one yet. Okay, so this is a hair. This is one of the structures that the skin produces. We're not going to go into the details. The hair shaft is the main thing there. And each hair is going to have a little smooth muscle there, which is called arrector pili. And when that muscle contracts, it lifts the hair, which is goosebumps, right? So that's how you get goosebumps when arrector pili muscle contracts. It's attached to hair. Okay. All right, so this one shows eccrine sweat gland, and this one shows sebaceous gland. There are also apocrine glands that are here. So there are three types of sweat glands, and each one of them is, it's a tubule. It secretes some kind of a liquid, and then the tube goes to the surface, and through a pore, that liquid leaks out. It gets secreted out. There are three different types. Okay, so there is an eccrine sweat gland, which is the most common. It's essentially water and salt. And it's used for thermoregulation. You're sweating out, and that's how, that heat, that sweat evaporates and takes the heat energy away from you. That is thermoregulation. We are really good at it. We sweat a lot. That's why we run marathons that, most other animals cannot do. There are animals like, cheetahs and horses and greyhounds that can overtake us in sprints. But we can always outrun them. We can run 100 miles. Now, marathons and ultra marathons and whatnot. And actually, the longer you go in distances, the better results for women. So on sprints, you just watch the Olympics. On sprints, men's records are better than women's records. Not by much, but they are there, right? So there's, that kind of power of speed. But once you get beyond marathons to like ultra marathons and even longer, 200, 400 miles, stuff like that, is where women win. They can last longer than men. But anyway, all of us can outlast a cheetah beyond the first 100 meters. After that, cheetah is dead. And we keep going, right? And that is how we got our prey. We outrun them, right? You run that poor, mammoth for miles and miles and miles until mammoth is even not, can't run anymore, and we're still fresh, and then we kill it, and we have dinner for the whole day and kill it, right? That was our strategy. We are long distance runners, and one of the important aspects of that is how much we can sweat and how efficient our sweat is. Like compared to horses. Horses are great, racing a mile or two. After that, they're dead. And we can outrun them after that because we sweat more efficiently. We can thermoregulate, get rid of extra heat more efficiently than almost any other mammal. That's our strength. We are runners. And those are eccrine sweat glands. Apocrine sweat glands are found more in places, hairy places like armpits and genital areas. And they're usually not active at birth. They get activated by estrogen or testosterone during puberty, and it's a thicker liquid. It oils those hairs, but also emanates smells. Sometimes we don't even notice them, but subconsciously notice smells. And those smells are actually very informative about genetics of that person. And often that is what makes this person attractive or not attractive to us. Because of genetic compatibility or not. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get to the immune system. But those are the sweat cells that emanate smells. And then finally, there are sebaceous glands. They're attached to the hairs, and they are oily, and they oil the hairs, protecting the hairs from split ends and stuff like that, from crackling. So the hairs are nice and smooth and elastic and shiny and beautiful. So those are the three types of the sweat glands for the lecture exam. You know them, where they are distributed. So this is going to be on the like scalp, right, where there's a lot of hair. So you need to know them for the lecture exam, but not for the lab practical. For the lab practical on that model, what is this sweat gland? You're done. You don't have to tell me which kind it is. Inside of the dermis, okay, let me see. See these orange, yellow things here? You've seen them as kind of ochre or orangish on the lab model. I don't see one here, but there is one here. Those are various types of touch receptors. The Merkel cells are kind of on the border between dermis and epidermis, and they're smaller. Others like Pacini's and Ruffini's and Meissner's corpuscles are bigger and much deeper inside of the dermis. And there are different types. These are layers. They look like onions, so there's multiple layers of membranes which are increasing the signal, right? So you get a little pressure, a little touch or something like that. These membranes are going to make it much bigger, right? They're going to enlarge the signal. So the nerve ending, which is inside of that onion, is going to respond and is going to send a signal to the brain, hey, I got touched here. And they're going to respond to different types of touch, light touch, itch, pressure, vibration, hot and cold are in there too. And then you have pain receptors which don't have this onion structure, they're just naked nerve endings. So if any of the cells of the dermis are injured, they're going to break out. There are going to be all sorts of molecules from the cytoplasm leaking into the space between the cells, and they're going to be detected by these nerve endings as pain, right? There was damage. It's telling the brain there's pain here. So that's how they work. And you're going to see it nicely on that model in the lab. All right, I wanted to. Okay. So this is all epidermis again. Dermis is underneath. Epidermis again. You have all these layers, and what you have also are another type of cell in the skin, which is melanocytes. Can anybody tell me where melanocytes come from?
Roland.
Do they originate in the skin? Remember foxes? They originate from the neural crest. Those are neural crest cells that have migrated to the skin, and they get transformed into melanocytes. If they don't get there, it's white. There's no melanin because there's no melanocytes. There's no color. So melanocytes are cells that arrived by migration during embryonic development from the neural crest and embedded themselves into the skin, and then the neighboring cells induced them, remember induction, to become melanocytes. That's what they can, right? They're not totipotent, they're multipotent, they can become different things. If they get to the skin, they cannot become skin cells, but they can become melanocytes. The melanocytes make melanosomes. Melanosomes are little vesicles that are full of melanin, which is a pigment, which gives the skin its color. And then the melanocytes inject the melanosomes into the other cells, into the regular skin cells, which they grow away from. So if you're exposed to the sun, your eyes are going, to, respond to the sun as a part of the pituitary gland called pars media, which is going to secrete a hormone called MSH, melanin stimulating hormone, which is going to tell the melanocytes of the skin to up the production of melanin. So you're going to get a tan, right? You're going to get darker after exposure to the sun, especially if it lasts for a while. And then what happens to those skin cells? They get pushed away and away and away and away and away, and after a few weeks, they get sloughed off as dandruff, right? So you lose your tan. November, you're pale. That is kind of how it works. So melanocytes are the cells that came in there from the neural crest, became used to become melanocytes. They're full of melanin. They put the melanin into those vesicles called melanosomes and inject them, transfer them into the regular skin cells, which then keep them. So you have a layer of skin cells that have melanosomes, and the quantity of melanosomes determines the darkness of the skin. Just look around this room. You have the whole spectrum from very pale to very dark, and everything in between, right? We came from different geographic regions originally, not maybe us, but our parents and grandparents. And if you can kind of look at geography, the darkest skins are found closer to the equator, right? Where the sun is the strongest. So you need that protection from the sun, because melanin is going to protect you from the damaging UV part of the spectrum of the sunlight. You go to Sweden, everybody is very, very pale. You don't have such a problem with the sun, right? Because there's not much of it there, and it's not that powerful. So you don't need that protection. So there's selection to have less of it. Why? Because that sunlight is also needed to stimulate, some chemical reactions inside of the skin that produce vitamin D. Vitamin D is essential for depositing calcium into bones. If you don't have enough vitamin D, you grow up with what disease? Rickets. You heard of rickets? You see the kids with rickets, all the bent bones and stuff like that, because they have not been built correctly, right? So that sunlight is necessary for production of vitamin D, which is necessary for the proper development of the skeleton. So we have a problem here, right? If you have too little melanin, you're going to get skin cancer because of UV. If you have too much, you are going to get rickets because you don't have enough vitamin D. Which is why in different parts of the world, different things are a priority, right? If you live where there's a lot of sun all year round and it's really, really powerful, protection from UV light is much more important. And you try to get your vitamin D through food, eating a lot of fish, for instance, right? In order to supplement. And then today, I go to the store and get vitamin D in a pill. And African Americans are often told to take vitamin D, don't you, right? Because you need it more because you're overprotecting your skin from the UV light, and so not producing enough of your own vitamin D. So you need to take it through diet. And then the Swedes, they eat a lot of fish anyway, some stinky fish too, but they don't need it, right? So there's a selection for losing the color in order to be able to produce more of vitamin D on yourself, so the next generation of kids doesn't grow up with rickets. So it's a balance, right? And in different parts of the planet, the balance is going to go one way or the other depending on the environment. Okay, anything else I wanted to say? Actually, all right, just all the way under, that is under the skin itself, is the subcutaneous tissue, which is mostly adipose or fat tissue. And also, depends on where you are, there is kind of a fibrous layer between the skin and the underlying bone or the underlying muscle, and that is called fascia. And so, if you consider subcutaneous tissue to still be kind of part of a skin, and I ask you, what is the name of the tissue between the skin and bone, skin and underlying bone? You're going to tell me fascia, F-A-S-C-I-A. And I think that is the end of the skin. There is a video, there is your textbook chapter. Everybody got a book by now? And finally, okay, they figured it out how to give you the books. It is 9:30. We will meet at 9:45.